Morning. Dumelang, goeiemorgen to all of you colleagues and guests. Today's lecture is a continuation of the NWU Wide Research and Innovation Public Lecture Series, which provides an opportunity for us to engage in critical debates, sharing insights, learning from one another, as well as getting input from stakeholders. And in this case, it would be colleagues from the Department of Health. Elie Wiesel writes, "To remain silent and indifferent is the greatest sin of all sins. To accomplish great things, we must engage, dialogue, debate robustly," as the VC usually says. As a university, we are here to serve, and you will realize that in today's public lecture. And this reminds me of what our President Cyril Ramaphosa said to Mamina. And as a university, we share that sentiment. Last month, we had a thought-provoking public lecture on the long transition in South African higher education, struggles around transformation. And I'm sure you'll agree with me that this public lecture sparked a lot of interest and debate, and it became a point of reference in many of our discussions thereafter, including at the University Management Committee. Today, we have yet another timely and much needed lecture entitled "The Northwest University Medical School. Is it a rumor? Is it a wish? Or is it a reality? Do we have the tools? Do we have the processes? Do we have the mechanisms to have a medical school? Where are we? What have we done? What will we be doing?" How interesting. We will tap on the knowledge, insights, and perspectives of the experts who have graced us today. We are very sorry that Prof. Avi Kotse, the custodian of health sciences in the university, could not be here today due to ill health. We wish him a speedy recovery, but he will definitely access this public lecture via live streaming. I'm going to be inviting the Vice Chancellor to do a special word of welcome. But before he does, I want to thank him for squeezing us into his hectic program today. It was on Tuesday when I was with him and Rudy came to inform me that the VC is not in a position to come because he's been scheduled to be somewhere else. I became ice cold because having this public lecture without him, for me, would have been like having a party without the host, or having a party without a cake for those of us who are food lovers. So we always try to organize these public lectures around his diary, but as you all know, emergencies come up, and I do accept that no matter how much he likes it, he will not always make it to these lectures. Thank you very much, VC, that you managed to come. And will you do us the honor of welcoming the speakers? One of the key things, VC, that made me feel ice cold was the fact that I felt that only you can really welcome the guests that are here today, especially our guest speakers. Thank you very much. is requesting that I should briefly introduce the guest speaker at this stage, so that when he does the welcome, we wrap up that part. I'll do so. It is my privilege to introduce to you Prof. Wieland Gevers. I've distantly known Professor Wieland Gevers when I became a merited member of the Academy of Science of South Africa in 2008 as the main driver of the establishment of the Academy of Science, and an Oxford scholar and a nationally respected medical scientist. And I came to know him closely in the last 2 years when I became member of the Academy of Science of South Africa Council. And I have experienced him as a very humble man with a fatherly demeanor. I've listened to his wise counsels in the council meetings that we have had. I've admired his foresight, knowledge, wisdom, clarity of mind at his age. And he knows that because I've always told him. So in his biography, he highlighted a few things for the sake of time. Prof. Gevers was born in Piet Retief, South Africa in 1937. He qualified in medicine with first-class honors at the University of Cape Town in 1960 and proceeded as a Rhodes Scholar to Oxford University to obtain the DPhil degree in 1996 under the Nobel Prize winner Sir Hans Krebs' regulation of liver metabolism. Prof. Gevers was Professor of Medical Biochemistry at Stellenbosch University from 1971 to 1977, and the same at UCT since 1978. Some of us were not born yet. He was the founder, president of the South Africa Biochemical Society, later the South African Society for Biochemistry and Molecular Biology, from 1975 to 1976, and again president from 1981 to 1982. Prof. Gevers directed the Medical Research Council research units at both the University of Stellenbosch from 1970 to 1977 and Cape Town 1979 to 1994, using biochemical, cell biological, and molecular genetic approaches to heart contractility, intracellular protein turnover, and cholesterol metabolism. Prof. Gevers has been awarded the Wellcome Trust Gold Medal for Medical Research and the Gold Medals of the South African Society for Biochemistry and Molecular Biology, the South African MRC, and the Southern African Association for the Advancement of Science. In 2004, Prof. Gevers was given the National Science and Technology Forum's Achievement as an Individual Over a Lifetime Award for Science. I will post there. His biography is available in detail. And quickly, let me introduce our second distinguished guest. That is Professor Andrew Robinson. I met Professor Andrew Robinson recently, about a month or so ago. And how we came to meet, Professor Avi Kotse said, there's someone I'd like you to meet. And when he is around town, I will definitely make sure that you meet him. And I remember when he was in town, I wasn't available, but he pushed that we meet, and eventually we did. Upon conversing with him, listening to his insights, we then decided that we must have this public lecture. And he accepted immediately, and he has kept to his word, and he's here today. Dr. and Professor Andrew Robinson is a public health physician. He has an MBCHB, DHSM, FCPHM, and is currently extraordinary professor in our university. He's also, within the university, he's mainly involved in the African Unit for Transdisciplinary Health Research. And he recently headed the clinical services from 2013 to 2017 in the Northwest Provincial Department of Health, where he provided clinical leadership and governance in the delivery of quality health services at hospital and primary health care levels. He has also served as the Deputy Director General of the Northwest Provincial Health Department from 2006 to 2013. His past roles involve being Research Site Director for the Medical Research Council South African AIDS Vaccine Initiative, a very important initiative for our country. He also has served as medical advisor for GlaxoSmithKline in South Africa, and he has served as Deputy Chief Medical Officer of Health in the Health Department. One thing peculiar about Professor Robinson is that he is both a medical scientist and a health services specialist, a very rare and much needed combination indeed. So VC, I think now you are ready to welcome them.
Still in the morning, am I right? Yes. Goeiemorgen, thanks. Ik wil Professor Refilwe bedank for this type of series. Thank you very much, Professor Refilwe, for yet another seminar. You know, what I like about this series is the audience and the participants are quite a good range. It's very rare that we find ourselves management, members of the university community, and students together under one roof to engage on matters affecting the future of the institution, and also to share views and ideas with them. Thank you very much. I also do notice the presence of students here. The more we have in the other series, the better. But your presence is very important, and thank you very much for taking interest in these things. And members of management that I see here today, to our guests, welcome to the Northwest University. We really welcome the inputs of all experts in the strategies and all our dreams and plans as where we are at the moment. Professor Robinson, you know, you've been with us from the inception of this idea of having a medical school. And we really want you to take us through till the implementation stage. We know very well, Professor Gevers, that Professor Gevers, that we have not yet received a go-ahead yet. The decision has not been made, but we will see from the presentation with Professor Robinson that we have presented a very convincing plan of this, and Prof. Avi Kotze and the colleagues worked very hard to ensure that our plan is in a very convincing manner to the department. We are very positive. I'm confident that what we have presented is saying, as a university, we are ready. Actually, we've been more than ready long ago. I'm not sure how it happened that, and with all due respect, that universities like University of Walter Sisulu University, Prof. Refilwe, even offered a medical school before us. I cannot imagine how that happened. Was it just not lack of interest from our side, or how did that happen? But I guess the deans will agree with me here. Prof. Benzo, the Dean of Science, will say, looking at our programs at the university, the Dean of Health, Prof. Avi, and the colleagues in the faculty there will also agree that we've got all the necessary building blocks to offer the medical program, I mean the medical faculty. We have the necessary building blocks. And as a university, we are now ready, and we have expressed this. We are only left with now political will. It only will take political will to say, yes, let it happen. And of course, we will have to also really lobby. You know, in politics, you lobby. There's a word lobby you use. So we will have to do the necessary lobbying, but basically convincing the powers that be that the Northwest University is ready, capable, and willing to offer the medical school. And colleagues, let us work this together. I know it's going to take also a huge financial commitment to that. But if you look at the benefits of this as to the country in general and the contribution that we are prepared to make, the financial commitment really cannot outweigh the benefits in terms of the service that we will be to the country through this program. I just had a student talking to me just before this series, Professor Refilwe, saying, I was even looking at applying at other universities. I hope this gets approved before I finish my program to consider other universities to go and do my medical training with. Because he says to me, the Northwest University is the best place to be. You know, that was really to me, and he was not flattering me, you know. I could tell he was saying it from the bottom of his heart. And by the way, sitting next to Prof. Robinson there, he was saying to me, hey, you know, your strategy, guys, is really positioning you very well out there. Let's not worry about what the media picks up on, other things that are not related to us and are just speculations and rumors. But of course, if those issues are found, we will have to deal with them. But we know we must be ready and prepared to deal with such issues that are misrepresenting us in the public out there. But we should also be ready to acknowledge and also put it to the public that we are an excellent academic institution that is really ready and amount to the task before us as an institution. So Prof. Robinson said to me, hey, your strategy, your transformation is really well received out there, and we see the results and the benefits thereof. By the way, Prof. Gevers, we have committed in our new strategy statement, committed the university, or commit ourselves as a university to position and transform the Northwest University as an institution of higher learning, as an institution of quality as far as the core business is concerned. And this initiative talks to the quality that we are confident about, how we will further position the Northwest University by the quality of the programs that we are prepared to deliver. Of course, we also then want to position it as a unitary institution, not as separate campuses anymore, and with a commitment to social justice. This is the university that we are. Thank you very much, colleagues, for this. You are not here to come and listen to the VC. Let's listen to the experts and what they say of this wonderful initiative of the university.
Professor Kwadi, Professor Phaswana-Mafuya, ladies and gentlemen and colleagues, thank you very much for the welcome you've afforded. I'm making a contribution here this morning as somebody who has been well informed of what is in mind, and you'll be hearing much more about this from Professor Robinson a bit later. And I'm very enthusiastic about what I've heard, and I would like to commend you for the initiative. So, Professor Kwadi, I'm 100% behind you in that sense. And I hope that this talk will go some way to...
Sorry, just the
Sorry, is it... I'll be facing that way especially.
You're going to stand over there.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Right, I hope that this talk will help to...
Sorry, I just want to see if it's on, switched on. Sorry, if you don't mind. Sorry.
I mean, wired up.
Here we go. Oh, batteries. Sorry.
All right, I hope you can all hear me within my natural voice. Yes, so in other words, I'm very enthusiastic and would commend the university for this initiative. I do know it requires further processing and approvals, but I do believe, as you'll see in a minute, I believe we have all the ingredients for success in the enterprise. And as somebody who has recently reached the age of 80, I feel that after a long involvement in higher education, in medical research, health-related research, that I hope that you will think that I can help this initiative by giving you some of the distilled insights that I've had over the years as to how one should approach this task at a high level, especially. In other words, what is it that one is about when one starts a medical school and starts educating people to be good doctors. So this plan has my 100% support. Now, first of all, most of you will know that doctoring is a very fine art as well as a science, and it involves three parts of the body that must all work together. First of all, the head, the heart, and the hands, what I call the 3 H's. And essentially, the head means that your brain or your mind has to show coolness under pressure, resourcefulness, problem-solving orientation, sound basic knowledge, and continuous learning, the aptitude for continuous learning. Now, I've said earlier that what I was going to talk about are the kinds of things that one should bear in mind as one gets through with the nitty-gritty of all the organizational aspects. One has to go back to what is one trying to do. And in higher education, I've spent a large part of my life trying to persuade university leaders. Oh my gosh, I've lent on some. Please, Rudy. I've spent half my life trying to persuade university leaders that in describing a degree, one is not describing the structure of a degree, not the number of classes, not the number of courses, not the number of credits, etc. The purpose of the degree. What are you trying to achieve as an institution, and what do you hope that your graduates will be able to achieve? And these are the mental aptitudes and skills. The heart and social orientation, empathy with others, the weak, the young, the old, the sick, understanding community, family structures, and the nature of teamwork. Thirdly, the hands, manual skills, using equipment, doing tests, having courage, and being cautious, doing no harm. Each of these requires to be built into the objectives of what one hopes the graduates will be able to do, and from that one works backwards to ensure that all the students have the opportunities to learn and to experience and to show that they are acquiring these skills. So I've looked at the plans for the project that Professor Robinson kindly provided. The project was summarized on the 2 campuses, with a 3rd campus ready for development. An impressive productivity in key areas, research papers, patents, staff ratings, specialized centers, broad spread of disciplines, appropriate orientation, And as Professor Kwadi said, you are absolutely set up to do this, and I'm full of praise for what has been achieved by this university. And this slide, summarized in the health sciences, again taken from one of Professor Robinson's slides, I just inserted this to show that I've been through all of this to show all these different centers and institutes and programs and activities, and they are wonderful to set up. In addition to that, what is shown in red in the bottom corner there, a School of Medicine for the training of doctors. So the most important ingredients, the fundamentals of training doctors in the 21st century in this country specifically, is combining learning and doing. In other words, the days of having 3 years of full-time lectures and practicals and then starting to learn what patients look like and how you approach them and so on, that is completely out. You have to design a curriculum in which there is combination of learning and doing, and they reciprocate with each other. You learn from what you do, and you learn about what you do in order to understand properly. The second is the whole body approach to health and disease. You are perfectly aware that in this modern age of hyper-specialization, you can easily find a specialist who knows exactly how to remove your prostate, but who hasn't got a clue about anything else. And I can tell you lots of stories of how I've experienced this, that the silos in which many of our best specialists live are not what you want when you set out to train doctors, because doctors have to understand the whole body in health and disease, and that has to be in their minds all the time. Even when they think there's something wrong with a kidney, they've got to think of whether what is wrong with the kidney is affecting the heart and the brain and the liver and the patient's circulation or whatever it may be. The third thing is that healthcare is teamwork. The way we humans do things, the doctor isn't the one who will do everything, but there will be teams of people and nurses and physiotherapists and occupational therapists and a number of other workers in the healthcare team. And it's teamwork, and nobody can be a prima donna. Nobody can expect to lord it over the other disciplines or professionals, and nobody can expect to do the whole job and direct the whole job without listening to what other people have to say. I'll come back to these in detail. And the most important point for you from my long experience at both the University of Stellenbosch and Cape Town, and which is, by the way, built into the new forthcoming Academy of Science of South Africa report on the training of health professionals in South Africa, which I commend. It will shortly be released. It was approved at our last council meeting. And that will, one of the most important principles in that is that you cannot have a platform for the training and education of doctors or health professionals for that matter without having joint oversight of the platform on which they're going to learn and do. And so therefore, whether you are in partnership as an institution, in this case Northwest University, with the health authority, Northwest Province Department of Education, Department of Health, and other authorities, with hospital authorities you may be working with, or clinic authorities, you have to have a joint ability to influence what happens. We've had, to give an example, in the early phases of this century, a situation where a CEO of a large academic hospital like Groote Schuur was able to tell the dean of the medical school at UCT, get lost, I'm going to run this hospital this way, and your students will just have to be piggyback onto what we are doing. And the dean likewise told the CEO, you are just a servant of my medical school, and you should do exactly what I want to train our doctors and train our different students. But there has to be joint, amicable oversight of the platform. Now, to get back to learning and doing, I mentioned that one has to combine the two. So contextual learning is important. Student-centered learning, topic-centered learning, learning around a topic about details that are important in understanding that topic. However, at UCT and Stellenbosch, for example, this has been done there's no discipline being taught to students. Nobody studies a discipline called pathology or medical biochemistry or physiology or even anatomy. They have courses which have different names: how to be a doctor, how to understand bodies or health and disease. So therefore, I find that in fact the amazing thing is that students, when I examine or talk to them in their later years, they simply lack any information that is systematic to a discipline. For example, inflammation. They've all learned around topics, but you've got to have the basic disciplines teach the basic theory of a discipline. That's got to remain in the curriculum. I cannot emphasize this enough, because otherwise people will not understand the difference between cancer and inflammation, and will not be able to understand what goes on in wound repair, and will not understand important things like immune responses and electrical, hydraulic, i.e. through the circulation, and chemical processes in physiology, will not understand that endocrinology is the body's internal pharmacology. They will simply lack the sort of core, the 5% of every one of the disciplines that used to be traditional in health education, taught as sort of lecture courses, that you have to teach, and you have to learn it in a dedicated and committed way until you know it. It will not come from the general program of contextual learning and doing. So that must be built in. People have got to understand. The second thing is that learning detail and application by context with integration of disciplines and information. That is very much the same thing. You need practicals. For example, I'm appalled. In my long career, you might be interested to know, I've taught more than 5,000 medical students. Every time I go to see a doctor, he says, "Hello, Prof, do you remember me from this class?" In fact, later on in this session, you'll experience a similar case of that. So therefore, you must have practicals. Nowadays, all those blood tests are done by machines and pathologists and the National Health Laboratory Service. Unless you, as a medical student, have learned to do a side room test with your own hands in a practical, you'll never understand what those machines are doing and the errors they may be making, etc. You simply have to learn the basics, and those skills of doing chemical work, of doing physiological work and hematological work, etc., those have to remain part of the curriculum. Please don't edit it out. Don't have sort of online simulations of these things. The hands will atrophy, or they'll only be able to type on a typewriter. They will not be able to do the things that patients need. So you've got to have that manual skills and the deep understanding of what happens eventually. And there has to be direct experience of healthcare work, tasks of different kinds, of vertical orientation. I mentioned to Professor Robinson that when I was a medical student, I came from the East Rand, and there are many mine hospitals there. Every vacation, I was a male nurse in one of the mine hospitals. I carried bedpans, I washed patients, I injected patients, I gave them pills, I did everything that nurses do. And it stood me in very good stead. So you have to have a vertical orientation of how you understand the whole thing, right up to the most sophisticated procedure. You have to understand it all. And therefore, this has a bearing on your ideas about distributed learning, but to insist that students do things that they may think is below their dignity. And I want to emphasize again, it needs to be direct experience. A medical student has to experience directly what nurses do and feel. Otherwise, they'll never work with nurses properly. So you have to be able to do that. Now, I just want to illustrate very quickly, because time is short, that when I talk about basic principles in my lectures to medical students, I've always included the things that are regarded as absolutely essential. Now, nutrition is one of the great strengths of this university. In fact, when we recently reviewed the MRC has virtually shut down nutritional research, and Northwest University is the single bastion of nutritional excellence in the country left. And so I always taught the basic principles of vitamers, of why a whole lot of different substances can all serve the function of being taken in as a vitamin or a vitamin. Anyway, this is explained here, but I just wanted to, because time is short, I could go through this, but essentially enzymes are the things that work in the cells that make everything happen that happens in your body. Coenzymes are small molecules, co-catalysts that help enzymes do their work, but they're constantly being destroyed through turnover. Humans have lost some of the genes for making those coenzymes. Many foods contain coenzyme precursors. These are all vitamins if they can be converted in the body into those vitamins. And then again, cells vary in their ability to take up these precursors or coenzymes. As the body intake falls during malnutrition, there are differential effects in different cells and organs. The body has numerous compensatory mechanisms for holding onto the diminishing supply, a bit like us in Cape Town holding onto our water. And if this falls, then the blood tissue falls, but not the tissue. The tissue holds on. But once you have a generalized deficiency, tissue levels falls and you develop the nutritional disease. Now, I give as an illustration to you, if you teach these principles, students will remember this forever. And they will then have a different understanding of how you ultimately interpret this when you have the mundane things about patients and the foods they eat and the diets they take. A second topic, very quickly, is that the most neglected part of medical student studies is connective tissue. Lecturers usually spend about a second on this because it's boring and they don't know anything about it anyway. Now, I just want to explain to you that there are molecules in the body, and there are vast amounts of these. They are probably next to collagen, which is the protein, the main protein of connective tissue. These proteoglycans as a family probably constitute the second largest quantity by weight of compounds in your body. You, as a doctor, you ought to know that. They look roughly like this at a molecular level. The important thing is that they are enormously rich in water. They are hydrophilic. They contain an enormous amount of water. They're highly branched, enormous molecules, and they are stretched out molecules in 3 dimensions. And because they have this enormous water content, if you press on them, you can compress them, and if you release, they swell up again. So they're perfect shock absorbers. So medical students will never understand why joints go awry in osteoarthritis, etc., if they've not been taught the role of these chemicals, these proteins, which are present in your body in such a large amount as shock absorbers. You can adapt them a little bit, and you can have lubricants in joints, slightly changed molecules, and you can adapt them as the lubricant protective fluids called mucins in all your body tubes. So again, these are to illustrate to you that is fundamentally important to understand the human body at a level of functionality, not the detail that is taught in lectures. It is to understand it as a working mechanism. Now, the whole body approach to disease is that you've got to emphasize the quantitative and the qualitative aspects of everything. I used to spend an enormous amount of time emphasizing to students when it came to carbohydrate metabolism, they'd always be amazed. The textbooks would be full of Krebs cycles and glycolysis and equations and enzymes and very difficult to learn stuff. But I would say, in your body, what carbohydrate have you got? Glycogen. In the liver, enormous amount of glycogen. In your muscles, a lot of glycogen. So therefore, you've got to emphasize how much there is, and how much there is in the whole body, and how much sugar, glucose there is in the blood. And you have to know both what is happening qualitatively and quantitatively. You have to understand how organs and tissues are embedded in connective tissue and connected by blood and lymph with nervous signals. You have to note the consummate disease in one organ or the whole system, including the brain and the mind. You have to understand the implications of homeostasis and compensation. You'll never be a doctor unless you understand the incredible capacity of the human body to compensate and keep working and then suddenly drop dead because the compensation limits have been reached. You'll never be able to do it unless you understand those principles. Healthcare is teamwork. Never presume an automatic leadership role as a doctor. The doctor has ordered this, the doctor has said this, doctor has said that. But lead from within a team. Recognize the different skills and contributions. Listen to team members, what they think about the patient, about what might be done. Review progress at a team level. Include the patient and the family in the team. Motivate upwards as a team for improved resources and facilities and policies. So this is the principle of teamwork. Now I know this is going to be a distributed medical school with people working in, students working in clinics and smaller hospitals. The same principles apply. It's teamwork. There are nurses, there are different professionals, and the same principles apply. Now the joint oversight I've mentioned before, you must have joint structures to ensure optimum functionality of the joint education and training platform. There must be transparent resource application and practice. You've got to admit that the university gets grants from the government to train medical doctors. Deans often play games and tell the hospital authorities they must pay all the costs. The deans get money for clinical training. They must apply that money and use it for its purpose, and vice versa. Fair treatment of all role players. Now, if you have a distributed training platform, you'll have all kinds of general practitioners, you'll have all kinds of practitioners in different health disciplines who will be participating in the training. Make sure that you recognize them, whether you remunerate them, but that you recognize them in appropriate ways and treat them fairly, and don't overwork them and recognize the limits of what they can do. Continuous monitoring of outcomes, remediate if necessary. Now, I want to be rather provocative here because I know you have a nursing school, but my own long experience is that something went seriously wrong when the nursing colleges were closed and nursing degrees were offered in larger numbers at universities, and you have training of nursing assistants in different ways. But I believe that this is so important. Nurses must be the largest cohort of healthcare professionals. Doctors cannot be the largest number. Nurses must be 3 or 4 or 5 times the number. Their education and training must be complementary to that of doctors. It's a matter of emphasis, not of level. They aren't skivvies. They are not people that you talk down to. They are skilled people in their sphere, and their sphere is complementary and overlapping with that of doctors. Degreed specialized nurses are fine. They can do many good things. They cannot form the bulk of the nursing cohort. The 4-year in-service diploma was ideal at the level that it reached, the cost it had, because people were trained in service. They were paid. They did 4 years of work in the hospital as nurses while they were learning, also doing college studies. Service excellence was achieved, and upliftment of the population in this form of education. So I just want to put this here for your, I haven't talked to your nursing school, I haven't talked about this with other people, but just my private opinion about it is that the nursing college should be reinstated if possible. Ethics is incredibly important. In education and training, every student must know the basic legal, regulatory and professional requirements of practice, must put the sick individual first. Remember, there's this incredible emphasis on primary health care. Primary health care is fantastically important, and it's the basis of what you intend to achieve here, community health. It doesn't remove from the doctor the fact that there's an individual in front of him or her, an individual who is sick and who needs to be looked after. The rest of the community is there around that individual. That individual comes first when you are dealing with your doctoring. Then you can contextualize within the family and the community. Never do harm and build trust through honesty and tact. These have got to be built into a curriculum, and you have to build them into selection as well, by the way. Now, I just wanted to know that I have noted, and I just wanted to reassure you, I've noted the incredible emphasis that you'll be putting onto streaming your students, different options for proceeding once they have registered and once they are in different programs. Multiple options, heavy use of ICT and online learning, embedded in the Northwest Province communities with multiple partners. Fantastically impressive, and you'll be hearing from Professor Robinson about them. This is incredibly, this is of this time, and if you do it right, you'll be able to achieve all your goals. I wish you well in this important, exciting enterprise in this province. Its time has come. Thank you.
Let's face the facts. South Africa is ill. We're not healthy at all. It's got of the highest HIV, TB rates in the world. You can see from those previous ones. The graph on the left shows what I experienced when I was the communicable disease manager in Durban Metro, how the TB rates increased during the 90s. All those TB and HIV diseases are also included in what has been well described as the quadruple burden of disease. South Africa experiences inordinate levels of maternal and child disease, non-communicable diseases, and trauma, many, many multiples of times greater than peer countries. So, is everyone happy with the status quo? Put your hands up if you think it's okay to be ill. All right, I think I've got 100% support that it's not okay. This situation is not okay. South Africa is very richly endowed with natural resources. So why are we therefore so sick? What can we do? What can the Northwest University do to solve this problem? The delivery of health care is the most complex human undertaking. It's far more complex than putting a man or a woman on the moon. It's commonly known as a really wicked problem, those who study complexity theory. Now, let us take a few steps back and work out how did we get into the state of ill health. South Africa, like many developing countries, is emerging from its very violent colonization. It's apartheid, it's migration, and underdevelopment are just a couple of things that one needs to take into account as to why we've arrived here. Part of that colonial legacy is the medical schools that we've got at present. Our medical schools are characterized by being hospice-centric, curative, disease-orientated. Now, this Eurocentric healthcare training model is something which we've inherited, and notwithstanding all the amazing contributions. All the amazing contributions. Sorry, the technology here is complex. All the amazing contributions that have been made. Can you turn the? We've done the first heart transplant. We've invented the CAT scan machine, the Lodox, that's the total body X-ray scanner, and the smart lock safety syringe are all inventions. These medical schools have produced internationally top-class professionals, but yet we are in the health situation that we find ourselves with the quadruple burden of disease.
Shut on the system again.
Oh. It's ironic that we're going to have a technologically competent medical school.
Here we go.
And I managed to debunk that one with one fell finger swoop. Community-oriented primary care. Primary health care was developed in South Africa. I don't know if you are aware of the history. We all know and have heard of Chris Barnard. Heart transplants are far more interesting than the hard work of primary health care.
Takes a moment.
Okay. Professor Sidney and Emily Clark in the 1930s and 1940s in Pholela in KwaZulu-Natal developed the concept of community-oriented primary care. This development obviously didn't just arrive, it was built on, and most of medical profession is built on the shoulders of previous health professionals. That's a picture of the Clarks when they were in Pholela. Ironically, in the 1950s, when the apartheid government chased them out of the country, the Clarks and their like-minded colleagues went across the world, notably to America and Israel, and the concept of community-oriented primary care became globally a global phenomenon, which was recognized by the World Health Organization in 1978 at Alma Ata as primary health care was the most effective way of providing health care for all. Primary health care, and that's Robert Virchow, on which the Clarks built their concept of social medicine. He was one of the founders of, the forefathers of social medicine, on which the Clarks built their processes and their systems of primary health care within communities. Now, primary health care, I'll have to turn it off again, I don't want to break the system. Primary health care offers and provides health within communities. It fosters community participation, multi-sector approach, appropriate technology, and a health workforce development, and an equitable distribution of health care around people's needs. In other words, primary health care focuses on an equity-producing health policy. Health is found in our homes, in our places of work, in the environment, and where we play. It is not found in health facilities. So, Prof. Hugo at University of Pretoria has got quite a nice analogy of saying the goals of health are found in those areas I've described, in the home, environment, in places of work and play. That's where the goals happen. Healthcare is not found in hospitals and facilities. That's where the own goals are scored. That's where you often get multi-drug resistance, iatrogenic diseases, and the like. So, South Africa, will you turn back on? South Africa needs more doctors. So, with the community-oriented primary care approach, which is established in the country, that's the one component of it. Look where South Africa stands in relation to peer countries. The 0.4 per 1,000 population in the public sector in South Africa, as compared with our BRICS countries, India, Brazil, and Russia, for example, have far more doctors in the public sector per population than we have. In the Northwest Province, we've got the lowest number of doctors per population in the country. Interestingly enough, this university has got the best school of pharmacy, yet we've got the lowest number of pharmacists per population. That can't be correct. In this scenario lie huge opportunities for the university. You've all heard of Albert Einstein. He has many aphorisms, and I think this one is fairly relevant. You can't solve our problems with the same thinking that we used to create them. And with this in mind, and with what I've mentioned before, the model for the Northwest University Medical School has been born. Now, reflecting on these facts, the Northwest University needs a medical school. What Prof. Gevers has alluded to, all those concepts are extremely important. The Northwest University needs a medical school that is not the old Eurocentric model. It needs an Afrocentric model, a decolonized model, a decentralized model, and a community-orientated model of a medical school. It must be designed to deliver a cadre of caring, competent, technologically savvy, and fit-for-purpose health professionals. These health professionals should firstly be serving the Northwest Province, then the country as a whole, then why not the SADC region, Africa, and indeed the world. A lot of talk has been made about the medical school. Now, I insisted that we put the phrase, the school for health professionals. I think it's an important shift. We don't want to medicalize healthcare training. We need healthcare professionals, and we need people who can deliver health rather than medicine in that holistic framework which Prof. Gevers mentioned. A very detailed business plan has been developed and submitted to the Department of Higher Education and Training in July last year. That followed on a presentation which was made to the Joint Health Science Education Committee in January. And Higher Education asked for that business plan, which we delivered to them in July last year. The business plan has taken into account all the relevant factors that I've mentioned before, the distributed campus, the Afrocentric decentralized model, and at an international level has taken into account other examples of decentralized healthcare training. There's been the examples in Canada in the universities of British Columbia, Ontario, Washington, and even in the Philippines in Manila, where they are doing this distributed learning. The old traditional hospice-centric teachers are often anxious. How are these students going to learn outside these big teaching hospitals? How can you get a doctor that's taught about healthcare in communities? And when these students have been through these programs, which they have, and compete with students that have been in these big teaching hospitals, they compete and are in the top quintile of the students. So that is what people want. They want competent doctors, competent health professionals. They don't, and where they're actually taught becomes secondary to the fact that you're delivering a competent health professional. Last year, Prof. Paul Worley of Flinders University in Australia presented their model of decentralized health professional training. And he described exactly that, how those students came back and when examined by their hospice-centric, disease-orientated, old-school professors, they performed on a par and in the top 10 to 20% of those peers that weren't out in the hospitals. Obviously, the Sustainable Development Goals at a global level are important. Those are a number of the international considerations that have been taken into account with the business plan development. At a national level, it's fully aligned to the National Development Plan. You've all heard of the National Health Insurance. It's aligned itself to the National Health Insurance. The National Department of Health has shifted and put great emphasis on a primary healthcare approach. This falls directly in line with that primary healthcare approach. The Human Resources for Health Plan of the National Department of Health. You can clearly see we need more health professionals. This model, and I'll go into a little bit more detail later on, shows exactly that. Last year, on this campus, there's a South African Association of Healthcare Educationalist Conference, also known as SAHI. SAHI developed a consensus statement on decentralized training for health professionals that was adopted and has been widely endorsed across South Africa by all health trainers. At a provincial level, it will support all the provincial policy concretes. There's a lot of acronyms there. I can go through some of them. The VSTD, villages, townships, and small dorpies. You can see with a decentralized training model, this will support that policy which aims to develop the economies in rural areas. Agriculture, culture, and tourism is another important component. Renewal, reconciliation, healing, and renewal. Another important consideration which has been taken into account, and obviously saamwerk, saamtrek is self-explanatory. So taking into account at an international, national, and provincial level, it aims to develop a health professional that has shifted from the hospice-centric, Eurocentric model, which we've been accustomed to, and align itself with the community-oriented primary care that will meet the needs at a national, provincial, and international level. People often ask, so where's this medical school going to be? They envisage a big building, they can picture all the medical schools, and the answer is there isn't going to be that big, glorious edifice that you've seen before, the Grooteskeers and the Tygerbergs. That's not going to happen. It's not going to happen at the moment. It doesn't need to happen right now. There's sufficient infrastructure resources already available in the Northwest University and the Provincial Health Department to start a school. You've heard from the Vice-Chancellor, Prof. Khwadi. You've heard from Prof. Gevers. There's enough to get going, to start the process immediately. I base this on the fact that the team that developed the plan did a very extensive audit of all the facilities in Mahikeng and Potch campuses. It also went to the hospitals in the district to see what there was in place. This university has got a Faculty of Health Sciences, and it has a provincial health infrastructure and activities happening within that Department of Health, which by rights in other countries would already been called a medical school. At the moment, the Health Professions Council has approved training for undergraduate medical students and interns in our hospitals. That's happening already. We've already got very strong links with the University of Witwatersrand, Sefako University, also known as SMU, and University of Pretoria, all of which are willing and able to provide support for this initiative. We have other very strong links with the Nelson Mandela Fidel Castro Health Student Training Program. We've got more than 30 clinical medical officers already practicing within the province. And the University of the West Indies has offered its direct support to supply us with much needed health professionals and curriculum development, which is necessary. They achieved their independence in 1962, and it's really fantastic to see how they've emerged and how their universities have emerged to provide a caliber of training which is something that we could aspire to. They've been through a lot of the noise that we've been through already, and they've struggled through it and emerged, and hopefully we don't have to take so many years to where they've got, and we can learn from them. So the school design will be a twin core campus model, starting initially with the Potchefstroom and the Mahikeng campuses. The Vaal campus will join at later phases of the initiative. It'll be linked in the distributed model with 10 hospitals and their surrounding clinics, which are already in the province. The twin campus will and does have the facilities to provide a lot of that hands-on training which is necessary. The students will be based in these 10 hospitals and clinics, supported by the digital learning centers, which the Northwest University already has. The Northwest University has this is just a geographical idea of these hospitals spread across the province. It's not a very clear map, but the provincial boundaries are there, and those stars show where those facilities are. Clearly, there's other considerations that need to be taken into account in establishing these. The Northwest University has the second largest distance learning capacity in the country, second to UNISA. There are 40,000 students already using these distance units. These study centers are all over the country. So you can see a combination of health facilities and this study center training model, which will enable the distributed and decentralized training that we anticipate. Now, these are just a few slides to indicate some of the technology that is available. I brought this not to pick up any messages, but the University of Pretoria already has a mobile training system called ATA, which their students are using. They're using it from the first year of training, and community health workers are using it. They've offered us that technology to support this distance learning. Now, the aim is to get as many students as possible onto this training platform. It's a key principle to offer training to as broad a population as possible. The first year will be a credit-bearing year where all aspirant health professionals will be attached to community health workers and work with them using the ATA system within the distributed learning model. At the end of the year, a formal selection of these students will happen. So it's not going to be the matric that enters them into health profession training. At the end of the year, we'll use a system which is being used by UNISA, which will give a very good analysis of core competencies and potentials of those students. So you can see career pathing is going to be far more accurate in deciding, all right, you've got the attributes to be a doctor, you've got the attributes to be a pharmacist, etc. Obvious economic and obvious benefits in offering this community-based first year of training. Now, those students will keep those families that they have started their training from their first year throughout their training of 5 years. That'll have tremendous learning opportunities and continuity of care. After their first year with the community health worker, which is credit bearing, then the 5-year training will start. The first years will start in clinics, as Prof. Gevers alluded to, supporting clinics at a very basic level, providing service, not standing around and looking, but providing clinical services, being service-orientated from their first year. They'll move through clinics, community health centers, and into district hospitals, all under tutelage of family physicians. So the end product is going to be a community-oriented, competent, general practitioner, not a medical or a mini specialist who knows about pediatric nephrology but can't treat a child that's swollen and in renal failure in an area where there's no water supply. So it'll have a complete holistic look at the patient and have that ability to manage patients. Now, with this distributive model, this is just a summary of the various elements. Having a broadened access to care. I haven't gone into the fee structure, but there's a very favorable financial model which is not going to drain, obviously there needs an initial investment, but it's not going to drain the fiscus. I've mentioned the distributed campus model, the unique program with that first year with community health workers, the twin core campus, the applied technology. You can see if you have distributed learning centers, 10 of them, why can't you scale up and have another center in another area of the province? It's not impossible to scale up. You can have another center in another province. You can have another center in another Southern African country. You can, with this model, you're able to scale up, and the intention is that the Northwest University could produce as much as 1,000 medical students a year once it's reached its full potential. I skipped over the slides when I had that technological glitch. South Africa needs 120,000 doctors to reach that 2 doctors per 1,000 population to get equity. If we keep on at the current trajectory, it's going to take us 30 years to get there. We need a different scalable model to get there before that. This model offers that with this with the distributed campus framework. This process has gone through all the appropriate governance. It's been approved by the province. The Premier has endorsed it. The Northwest University Executive and Council have endorsed it. From what I've described, primary health care is not a doctor's problem. It is a very community-oriented problem that needs everyone's inputs. I've had a look at all the organograms in the university. I've got them all here. Some of you might have forwarded them through to the Dean's office. Every faculty and every department can contribute to a medical school. I think it's a wonderful opportunity for this university to align itself, and with what Prof. Crane mentioned previously, in the transformation process. Let me give you an example of what I mean about this involvement of every faculty. Nearly 60% of children that are admitted, if you add 24 and 40%, have got moderately or severe acute malnutrition. This data has been collected of children admitted to hospital, and of all children admitted, there are hundreds of children that have malnutrition. You heard Prof. Gevers' cycle of malnutrition. If a child is malnourished, they are susceptible to disease. That whole disease cycle needs to be understood. How can we have a Department of Agriculture, Natural Sciences, and Nutrition, centers of excellence in the university, and yet in our province, even today, children are starving to death? That's literally, it cannot be. There's a fantastic opportunity for the province to work with the university to develop systems so that no child goes hungry. You imagine the screaming and crying that goes on every night until that child hasn't got the energy to cry anymore, just because of no adequate nutrition. It's just not correct. So, if in this transitional and transformational process, the Northwest University can become the research and development arm of the province, these challenges are real challenges that can be addressed. All those departments can join in the multi-sector approach, which is fundamental to primary health care, in making sure that no children goes hungry again in the province. Last year, the Provincial Department of Health received a disclaimer for its non-financial performance. In other words, all the information services. This university has got information tech, it's got biostats, it's got behavioral change scientists, all of which can roll up their sleeves to assist the province. So in the difficult transformation time that all transformation is is challenging, there is an opportunity for the university to align with the province. And I know the Office of the Premier has asked to develop links with the university. These are some ways through the process of developing a medical school where the Northwest University can serve the province and the region in a way that provides optimal health. Prof. Crane last week said, if you're making this transition, where are you going to transition to? What is the process? That gives you some illustration of how you can move towards that transition by being the R&D of the province, by making sure that no children, it's such a basic thing, food, nutrition, breastfeeding to children is just not happening. And with these centers of excellence, that can be the focus. Now, I'd like to close. I think it's time, and there's hopefully a lot of opportunity for questions. 5 minutes. There's been a lot of talk about radical economic transformation. It hasn't been described, it hasn't been defined. I developed a new letter of the alphabet. Someone, one of our astute members and author said, maybe you should copyright it. Is there anything more valuable than health? Is there anything more wealth promoting than health? Virchow said health is fundamental to any stable society. So I think if we can get our province healthy, you cannot get a more fundamental economic transformation by making sure that every individual has the capacity to look after their own health. That's what primary care is. It enables you to be healthy in your home, not to be healthy in the hospital. And hopefully this is the path that we'll take. You can see, and we know that the medical school hasn't been approved yet. We're waiting for Department of Higher Education. I think with the political changes, we'll hear soon. And then it'll go through the Department of Health and Treasury, and we'll get there. We're very close, but there's enough to get going right away.
Distinguished speakers, and when we started, I posed a question whether we have the tools, processes, mechanisms to have the medical school going. And I'm sure you will agree with me from the presentations that have been given this afternoon that indeed we are ready to go. And I can assure you that the Northwest University is ready to lend a helping hand. And we know what to do, how to do it, as it has been outlined, and we are saying the time is now. That's why we're having this public lecture, because we want to make sure that we mobilize, we facilitate, and we come together, not just for the Faculty of Health Sciences, but for all of us as a university, because the benefits actually are beyond even this university, let alone the fact that all the faculties will benefit. South Africa will benefit, our children will benefit. We can drive out poverty and unemployment and all sorts of social ills through having this type of initiative. Thank you very much. And at this juncture, we will invite questions. We are very serious about offering people an opportunity to engage, because this is not just a lecture, but it's an engagement. So we're gonna take questions, and I'll probably take a few questions initially, and then have our speakers answer and take it from there. Okay. I see 2 hands. Why don't you help me? Because they'll need. You need both.
Okay, you hold it from inside. Okay, thank you very much. My name is Kabelo Khadebe. I'm a 3rd year student, and then very happy that this initiative has already started. I have a medical background. I studied a pre-medical course. I'm from Gauteng, and I'm aware that most medical universities or medical schools around the country, like I said, I'm from Gauteng. SMU practices next to a level 3 hospital. You go to VES, they practice next to a level 3 hospital. You go to UP, they practice next to a level 3 hospital. Steve Biko, you go to Matis, they practice next to level 3 hospital. Tigerberg. So my question is that are we also going to upgrade or improve some of the facilities in our hospital, Potchefstroom Hospital, or what? And then the other question is that, are we going to have other entries into the medical programs, like the entry in VETS? VETS has a graduate entry into the medical program, JUMP, or is just going to be a normal entry from 1st year till upwards? Because some of us are are already graduates. We're going to become postgraduates soon, and we want to go postgrad in medicine. I already applied in another university to study medicine as a postgrad. So my question is, are we going to have such entries as well? And then the last question is that I know that the University of Stellenbosch has a dual medium of instruction. So my question is, are we going to have a dual medium of instruction for this course specifically, or are we going to continue with Afrikaans being the main medium of instruction, other students using headsets for translation, or are we going to have a dual medium of instruction for this course? Thank you very much.
Okay, to the point.
Okay, thank you, Program Director. I just have one point that I want to make. Both guest speakers touched on this point, and which is about decolonizing of the curriculum. Now, in my view, looking at all medical schools in South Africa today, all of them actually portray this Western-orientated curriculum, this European-dominated curriculum. So the thing is, in South Africa today, we have seen that the task for intellectual production and thinking has been made an exclusive preserve for white people. You'll find that the lecturing component is actually more white lecturers and white academics. Black professors, especially black women, are excluded. So I feel like if we're going to have a Northwest University Medical School, it should actually reflect and actually portray an African society, meaning more African academics into the curriculum. That is true decolonization. And another sub-point will be that when you look at medicine, it's basically about how you treat or you diagnose or prevent a certain disease. So we must not only focus on Western ways of dealing with medication, we should also promote black African traditional ways of dealing with medicine, because medicine is not only a European thing or a Western thing, it's also an African thing. Because you will find that for us black people, medicine, illness or a sickness is not just a physical matter. It's also something which has to do with your disequilibrium between the ancestral world and the physical world. So we feel like a true decolonized curriculum in the Northwest University Medical School should actually include also African traditional ways. And the last point is this. You've got a medical school at University of Cape Town, Wits University, University of Pretoria, but the problem is we still have more problems in South Africa. We still have people who have lack of access to proper healthcare. So I believe a true decolonized Northwest University Medical School should teach its students and its graduates that once they actually obtain that qualification, they should not run to the private healthcare system. They should run to the public healthcare system, because it's in townships, informal settlements, and rural areas where we need more help in terms of healthcare. So it's not enough to send them to the private healthcare system, because we are members of communities before we are students. So we first have to go to those public healthcare systems. And the last point I'll make, just to touch on what my brother mentioned, is that I feel like it's important to have English as the primary medium of instruction for this Northwest University Medical School. If you are going to have programs with people like Cuba and the University of West Indies, which were mentioned, you're actually going to need a global international language, which is English. So that's my submission. Thanks.
Thanks, colleagues. I want to ask you to keep the simple, the questions short and to the point, please.
Okay. Okay. Professor Robinson, thank you for this. I'm very excited about what will happen. I'm from the Faculty of Engineering, and I've previously been involved with projects. I know you're also very interested in the health information systems and other health systems engineering related issues. I'm quite interested, and I hope that there can be some multidisciplinary programs or initiatives within the school, health systems management or health information system manager or whatever. So I would like to hear from you if you have any collaboration or multidisciplinary initiatives in this school or in this faculty.
Do you want to answer, or can I take another question? Okay. Take another one. Okay, and then I'll come to you. I'll keep it for you. Just keep it like this. Keep it like this.
Thank you very much, Douglas Oliver from School of Pharmacy. I was a bit confused with respect to the first year. I got the indication that the first year will affect all the current programs that are offered. Maybe I misunderstood it because you indicated that on that first year, students will be sort of selected or directed because of their competencies to certain fields. So the question is how that would affect current programs. I think that just a comment on one of the previous speakers as well, is that I think South Africa is sort of, if we look at the information that Professor Gevers and yourself presented, that the burden of disease in South Africa is to such an extent that we need everybody that can serve. I think we are beyond the time that we could say this reservation or that reservation. We need everybody that can really make a difference. What is the number of students envisaged? What is the break even to be viable? And what are the number of training staff needed for such a diverse, decentralized, compared to a centralized hospital-based, where you can actually have less training staff because it's in one setting?
I've acknowledged that guy, and then Prof. Mindri, and then over there. Okay, that's fine. There you go.
Thank you very much. My name is Masha Mokhorosi. I just only want to ask on the perception of a medical school at the Northwest University. As we know that a lot of medical healthcare teams are led by a lot of doctors, and they are most of the doctors' attitude towards pharmacists and nurses, and that kind of attitude, it is actually presented in a lot of unwillingness of other professions actually to take part in that. How is then the Northwest University going to structure its actually courses to make sure that these three main factors in health, which is doctors, pharmacists, and nurses, actually are in sync?
write it down. Okay. That's good.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Prof. Gevers, coming to the nursing and many years of trying to recurriculate, the challenge we face is very much the challenge that I'm asking in this program. I'm very excited about what you are offering. But was that the quality of healthcare has gone so down in our country that supervision, mentoring in practice for nurses became a null and void. Nurses don't want to take that responsibility anymore. And so in this model, the big challenge that I see is how to get doctors, nurses, everybody to be on board to take that challenge to improve our quality of services again, and then to take on the role again of being a mentor, a supervisor, a trainer in the practice area, because that's the one big thing. The other thing is with nurses, the big challenge about the diploma degree issue was the thing that with diploma, it was a 4-year study equal to a 4-year study of degree, which was a very uneven process. And so the suggestion was made that the colleges should remain, but that what they offer becomes incorporated into the healthcare system, into the higher education system. And people have lost that vision and wanting just to say it should happen at universities. And it shouldn't. The college system should be there, but we have to rethink the qualification as such, because it's equal 4-year training. And that was the basic principles about the thought process behind that.
One last question, and then we'll...
Thank you. Thank you very much. I just want to make a statement, and maybe you can reflect on it. And that is, I think we all agree that that there's a shortage of health workers in South Africa, and there is a necessity for a medical school. I mean, there are good arguments, but my question is that the only solution? Because if you look at numbers of brain draining in South Africa, it is terrible. So it is good that we teach medical doctors and put them in the system. But at the moment, we are teaching them for Canada and for Europe and for other countries. So this effort must be balanced with a focus on preventing people, health workers leaving South Africa. Otherwise, this will only be money throwing into a black hole, and that's going to put us farther back into debt.
Thank you very much for all those questions. And it seems, even with my technological faux pas, the message got through. And the intention of this presentation is to launch the medical school to the Northwest University community. Now, I'll go through as many of the questions as possible. To upgrade the facilities, yes, that's important. In July, 700 students are coming back from Cuba to get onto our health facilities platform. There's already a process in upgrading those facilities to receive those students. There's a total of nearly 3,000 students will come between July this year and 2022. So the health system, through a very active process from the National Department, is aiming to upgrade the clinical training platform to receive them. As the Deputy Minister of Health, Joe Partler, said, these students arriving back from Cuba is going to be like a shock treatment to the health system, and that it's going to shift the emphasis towards the district hospitals where most of these students are going to be accommodated. So it's an important component. Entry level into MBCHB, well, that's important. That depends on the curriculum, the actual curriculum of what you're coming with and at what level you go into. And the dual medium of instruction, the Prof. Refilwe will talk about that. The issue of decolonizing the curriculum and led by the white health profession, black health professionals. This model is really going to be interesting because is the university going to offer community health workers recognition as teachers? Because they'll be teaching students. And these community health workers have a short amount of formal training. But those community health workers know more than any doctor about how to enter a household, how to enter a community. So there is consideration of that. It's an important one, and it's really going to change the way that people think about who is an eligible teacher. Other teaching will happen with simulated patients, and those will be in the community. So there's going to be a lot of change of actually who's going to be teaching the students. The traditional medicine is important. The Maiking campus has a big capacity in African traditional medicine. It's important. What that offers, not only in cultural importance, but in terms of developmental opportunities. All the raw materials required for medication, all those remedies. Why should other countries develop raw materials for drug development? That's a massive opportunity for this university's pharmacy section. How are we going to keep people in public service and not to go to private sector? And how are we going to keep them in the country? Retention is a fundamental component of the plan. It's been shown, and there's been a lot of studies shown, that candidate students who are recruited from rural disadvantaged areas serve those areas in far greater numbers than those that are recruited just because they've got a great matric pass. So in that distributed model, people will be recruited from the areas in which they live. They'll be staying in those areas. Human beings have got feet, they'll move. You cannot stop it. There's a global movement of health professionals. And that's why we have to make important links, for example, with the University of West Indies. They can bring expertise in here. And there's a recognition. If it's just, you can't stop it. You've got to manage around it. And the most important part of it is in the selection of the students into the training program. The University of Philippines, Manila, communities actually select who should go and study medicine. The communities make that selection, not individuals. And those people go back and serve. So there's a lot of thoughts that's been put into the retention of health professionals. The multidisciplinary approach, I didn't touch on it in much detail, but biomedical engineering is just one example. It's a fantastic example. Illness doesn't happen in hospitals. It happens because there's no sanitation. So what engineering is needed for that? What water systems, what power systems are needed? So there's tremendous scope, even for all disciplines in the university. The law faculty have got a fantastic opportunity to contribute all the medical legal issues, theology, all the spiritual aspects of healthcare, Agriculture. Why are children going hungry? And we've got all this capacity to grow food. So every faculty, and I went through the organograms in detail, and I'd love to be able to assist and facilitate through the African Unit for Transdisciplinary Health Research, are well placed to pull in all the various role players to get a multidisciplinary approach to solving problems. I think this university is really well placed in moving in that direction. The first year, at the moment, first year students are largely admitted on their matric results. The community-oriented primary care first year will be with students working with community health workers. So it doesn't matter if you come from a private school with 6 A's, or you come from a rural school that battles with science and maths education. That first year will give you an opportunity for that urban-based 6A in matric person who's got no idea about what really goes on in communities, to face those realities of what goes on in communities, and for those that haven't had the opportunities for those sciences, to bridge those gaps. So at the end of that year, then the formal 5-year training is going to happen. So the first year is a credit bearing that is going to embed the fundamentals of community-oriented primary care. The financial model of break-even, I haven't got those details, but the intention is to get, there's a potential to get to 1,000 medical students per year. Terry, break-even can happen in?
Yeah, so it's 120 students per distributed campus each. So there's 1,200 students at the entry, at first year entry level. And the break-even point is about 84%, which sounds very high, but we know that there's a great demand for place in medical school, so we're not concerned about the break-even point.
So the break-even has been calculated in detail, and a lot of variables put in, and the model does lend itself to that. Yes, the teamwork of working with health professionals. If you're a doctor and you ignore what the cleaner in the ward tells you about a patient, then you're missing important information. So if students start within the community, in households, and then work in clinics, largely under tutelage of family physicians, and all the clinics are nurse-driven. They'll be working and serving with nurses. That ethos and that attitude hopefully will be inculcated from an early stage. I agree the issue of mentoring is not easy. Modern training offers the students the opportunity to direct their learning. They're not going to be directed this year, this term, you do this and that and that. They will know what competencies are required, and within the opportunities offered, they will be able to direct it. So at the end of their various allotted blocks, they will be able to, they will need to fulfill those competencies that are required. You don't need to have for example, Prof. Gevers could sit here and offer his biochemical tuition to all the distributed campuses. He doesn't have to physically be there. He can offer his lecture. They can pick it up on site. There will be a necessity for coming into the universities to do some of those practical works. A lot of those facilities, as I said, have been audited. I think I've covered most of the questions. There are a couple left for Prof. Gevers and Prof.
Yes, Prof. Robinson has actually addressed the question that was asked about how you ensure that there is a good standard or a high quality standard of care. This is the key question, and he's given his answer to that. I myself believe that it's hugely important that the university also has additional input from the skills that are present in the university. In other words, that one has contact with the students, that it remains a living relationship, and that the students don't eventually feel isolated and disillusioned somewhere out there. So they must remain part of the whole enterprise. And there are various ways in which, I won't go into detail, but there are various ways in which you can ensure that each one of them will understand what is meant by really good practice, and how incredibly interesting these things actually are when they can be illustrated in a very attractive way. So therefore, it's really the university has to ensure that this is not just an enterprise that any company could do. This is a university enterprise, and so the quality ultimately is the responsibility of the university and of the whole university, but especially the people directing the program.
Thank you very much. I'll address the question on language and thereafter do vote of thanks and wrap up if it serves the House. I'm looking at the time. On the question of language, as a university, we have a language policy, and the policy is very emphatic about functional multilingualism to improve access and inclusivity for all. Yes, we may not have other languages developed in such a manner that we can utilize them as from tomorrow, as languages of tuition, but it's certainly the intention. We know from experts, language experts, that language can be a barrier to comprehensive understanding of the subject matter. And the university is taking this very seriously. This is, and as the university management, we are engaging deeply about this. How do we make this effectively possible, so that we don't say we adopt functional multilingualism while in the meantime we are monolingual? Yeah, so we are aware of the challenges, we are aware of the efforts that are needed, and we are certainly working on that. I hope that satisfies. If you have further questions, we can discuss outside this meeting. I want to take this moment to do vote of thanks. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, for being well receiving of this initiative, because this initiative really is intended for us to dialogue in the manner that we've been doing. And if we don't do it, someone will do it for us. And as the new DVC for Research and Innovation, I could have experienced, some aloofness or some hesitance, but instead, what I have seen is how welcoming you have been to new ideas in spite of your busy schedule. So I want to really thank all colleagues from the different faculties that have come, especially those outside the Faculty of Health Sciences, when they were told this is a cross-cutting issue. Let's all engage. It concerns our day-to-day lives. They all came. Thank you very much. And I also would like to thank the Vice-Chancellor in absentia, without whose support these lectures would not have taken place. Let me also duly thank the Faculty of Health Sciences for rising to the challenge, because all faculties are going to have an opportunity to showcase, to speak on topical issues. And in this case, the Faculty of Health Sciences have outdone themselves. Yes, I was involved in inviting speakers and inviting especially Prof. Gevers, and but the faculty has been behind us. I want to extend a special word of thanks to Rudy, the event manager, for doing all the donkey work. It's one thing to dream a dream and say, I'd love to see this happen. It's another thing to actually have it take place. In fact, this morning, he sort of reminded me what it takes, to put up a public lecture of this nature, there's a lot of work behind the scenes, from follow-ups, getting the venue, setting up the venue, looking at, it's a mammoth task, and I will forever be indebted and to my PA who has been behind you, and all the departments. In fact, I learned that to have a public lecture of this nature, you actually must get protection services to approve it. And it's quite, a mammoth task. And I must also thank the communications department, for popularizing the event, for making it possible for us to have this public lecture live streamed, for organizing media. We don't know when this will be broadcast, but we are aware that the SABC is here, and we want to also thank them for being here, because we really want the world to know that we need a medical school. We are ready for it, and we need to work with them in making this a reality. I hope I'm not forgetting anyone. Lastly, but certainly not least, once again, to thank the speakers. I don't want to tell you when did we decide on this public lecture, but they were so ready because of their keenness and passion for giving and for sharing, to come. We were at the council meeting just 2 weeks ago with Prof. Gevers, and he said, no, I'll come. And he came. And only to find that, and I must thank Prof. Robinson, because the program was set and it was going to be him presenting. And when he heard that I've approached also Prof. Gevers, he said, you call him, he is my former lecturer, I know him. So
can I tell them something?
Yes.
Just to illustrate this, you saw Prof. Gevers' that huge molecule. He lectured me in 1977. I've still got his notes. The prototype, that's the prototype molecule over there.
Wow. 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 So I don't want to forget to thank the provincial reps that are here, the professional health bodies that are here, the public that has joined us, everyone. Thank you for your valuable inputs. Even listening is a contribution, because with what you have heard, you'll do something. And just in appreciation, just a token of appreciation for our speakers, to Prof. Gevers, thank you so much. Even next time when we call you, please do come. God has spared you for a time such as this. Thank you very, very much. And to Prof. Robinson, I've not known you that long, but it has been so interesting to meet you. And thank you for doing all the work on our behalf of convincing this house and the world out there that we are ready. It's such a blessing to have someone like you in our team. We haven't made a mistake to appoint you in 2018 as one of our extraordinary professors. Thank you very much. Shall we give them a round of applause? The session is over. Thank you very much.